Thank you. Welcome to the conference, The Problems of Philosophy in Virtual Reality. As you all may know, the conference was inspired by this book by David Chalmers, Reality Plus, Virtual Worlds and the Problems of Philosophy. As you can see, my copy of it has been very lovingly read. And I do actually have an electronic copy of it. The cover of that is pristine. So it just goes to show that virtual reality is actually better. Virtual books might be better than real books. We have a very exciting lineup of speakers. All of them are going to some extent, depart from or engage with issues that Dave discusses in Reality Plus. Our first speaker of the conference is Dave himself, Dave Chalmers, who is the closest thing to a rock star that you can get in philosophy. This is not just because, as you will see, he often sports a leather jacket. It's his signature look. But also because he just keeps coming out with one smash hit after the other. The first book to, as one might say, go platinum was, of course, The Conscious Mind, which many people will be familiar with. And in it, Dave did many groundbreaking things. Among them was to popularize the philosophical zombie. So the philosophical zombie, a creature I'm very fond of, is a being who is just like a conscious being in physical respects, even in intentional respects. So my zombie twin is just like me in her behavior and in her thoughts, but my zombie twin lacks phenomenal consciousness. So one of the things that Chalmers did in The Conscious Mind was to bring the zombie into the Philosophical Hall of Fame. Since then, in between The Conscious Mind, which was published in 1996, and the publication of Reality Plus, Dave has published just a vast number of books and articles that have been enormously influential in a very, very wide range of different topics in philosophy. He's made contributions to the philosophy of language, epistemology, metaphysics, 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 metaphysics. How many metas are there? And of course, you know, a wide range of issues in the philosophy of mind, including the philosophy of perception, intentionality, as well as, of course, the study of consciousness, which he rejuvenated. He breathed new life into both the scientific and philosophical study of consciousness. So today, though, we are celebrating his latest book, Reality Plus, or engaging with it, maybe critically as well as celebrating it. I guess people who have read it, so all the speakers and people who've read it will agree with me that it's an incredibly wide-ranging book. It covers many of the central problems of philosophy, epistemology, metaphysics, in epistemology, metaphysics, and the theory of value. In addition to advancing some really interesting, original, and somewhat mind-boggling theses, the book also discusses and engages with ideas that you may have wondered about but were always afraid to ask. And of course, the philosophical zombie appears again, as well as some other characters like the Vulcan, who we'll come across, I'm sure, in the discussions. Though I have to say I was a little bit dismayed to learn that after having introduced zombies to the Philosophical Hall of Fame, Chalmers now says that he would be willing to sacrifice 5 of them to save a single conscious being. Well, the chicken, he's not entirely, he doesn't come down in favor of the chicken quite so strongly. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce David Chalmers. Oh, look what I've done. I would love to. I'm very pleased to introduce David Chalmers from New York University to speak to us about From the Matrix to the Metaverse with some help from AI. Thank you, Dave. Oh, you have a microphone. Yeah.
Most of my work since the book came out, I mean, maybe almost a year and a half ago now, has actually been on AI. There's so much interesting work going on now with in AI with all these amazing language models. And so I thought maybe it would be interesting to at least flesh out some of the themes from the book with a connection to AI, thinking about certain issues at the intersection between AI and virtual worlds. Really, there'll be issues about virtual worlds, but I'll try and at least connect them to what happens when advanced AI is on the scene. My title is From the Matrix to the Metaverse, two of the great virtual worlds in science fiction. The Matrix, of course, the Wachowskis' famous movie from 1999, and Neil Stephenson's Metaverse from his novel Snow Crash in 1992. As we'll see, both illustrate kind of complementary aspects of virtual worlds. Matrix illustrates the hypothesis that we might ourselves already be in a virtual world. The Metaverse illustrates the idea of the virtual worlds that we might come to create, which raise connected but somewhat distinct issues, as we'll explore as things go along here. So my topic here is virtual world, and one of the points of this book, Reality Plus, is to approach many issues in philosophy in light of virtual worlds, using that as a lens to. By the way, the Swedish translation of the book is now out, right, Christer? Do you happen to have a copy with you to wave around? Okay. In Swedish, I noticed they took away the plus, right? It's a virtual worlds : philosophical problems. So bringing the virtual worlds from the subtitle into the title. But yeah, virtual world, as I understand it, is an interactive, computer-generated world. So two main conditions here. The paradigmatic virtual worlds include, the virtual world you encounter in standard video games. Here, World of Warcraft. It's interactive. You can, hang out in these worlds, and it affects you. You affect it. And also, potentially, it's computer generated. This is not yet a full-scale virtual reality because it's not experienced immersively on as in, for example, through a virtual reality headset. Typically, this is just, played on a standard two-dimensional screen. Here is the world of Second Life, another paradigmatic virtual world, but not yet a virtual reality. For virtual reality, we have the further condition of being immersive. Virtual reality is an immersive, interactive, computer-generated world, where the third condition requires that these worlds be experienced from the inside in 3 dimensions, as if one were present at the center. And these days, virtual reality is typically experienced with a virtual reality headset, such as here the Meta Quest, where you don this headset that blocks you out from the physical world, but suddenly places you now within a whole new virtual world. By the way, all indications are that Apple is going to announce their new virtual reality headset on June 5th in a keynote speech at the conference there. So everyone is very interested to see what Apple will come out with here. The rumors are that theirs is going to involve some element of augmented reality. Augmented reality is illustrated here with you're in touch. You still see the physical world out there, but it's now augmented with digital objects. I mean, the paradigmatic form factor here is actually, souped up glasses, so you see the physical world through glasses. Unfortunately, that technology is not yet fully developed or mature, so I gather the Apple system is going to have what they call pass-through. You're actually not directly, light does not pass from the physical world to the eyes, but there's some kind of cameras on the outside of the VR headset that passes this through. So some paradigmatic virtual reality environments are here. The game Beat Saber, where you slash the virtual cubes with your virtual lightsaber, or a virtual social world. Here, the world of VR chat, which is probably the most popular social virtual world right now. So the central thesis in this book is that virtual reality is genuine reality. It's not a second-class reality. It's not fake reality. It's very common in philosophy for people to hold that virtual reality is fictional. We'll hear some of that as the conference goes along, or that it's an illusion or a hallucination. I want to argue that all those views are wrong. It's actually, virtual reality can be first-class, genuine reality. This breaks down into, at least in the structure of the book, into three central theses: one epistemological, one metaphysical, and one in the domain of value. Epistemologically, I argue that we might be in a virtual reality already. At least we can't rule that out. We can't know that we're not in a virtual reality, and that in fact it's a serious hypothesis that we are living in a matrix-style computer simulation. Metaphysically, I argue that virtual reality is not an illusion or a fiction, that virtual objects, the objects you interact with in VR, are real objects with real causal powers and so on, not mere illusions or fictions. And in the domain of value, I argue that at least in principle, one can lead a perfectly meaningful and valuable life in virtual reality. Maybe better, not necessarily better than the physical world, not necessarily worse, but in many respects on a par. A fourth thesis is that virtual is one about the mind, that virtual minds are genuine minds. Perhaps some of this will actually come up along the way too. That this interacts especially with issues about AI. I mean, the central question is, will the AI systems we develop in the future actually have genuine minds? And I'm on the side of, yes, at least they can have genuine minds. Just to connect this a little more to AI, I'm going to focus quite a lot here on AI worlds, AI-generated virtual worlds designed and implemented by an AI system. I mean, actually, the Matrix in the movies is an AI world. It's designed and generated by the machines, who are AI systems. But as AI technology is developing now very fast, AIs are starting now to design and generate everything, right, including your students' papers. Not here, I'm sure, but yeah. And AIs generating AI-generated virtual worlds are already well on their way. I mean, this is actually an idea that's been around for a while. People talk about procedural generation, say, of video games and so on. This was a book from 2016 where bringing about many contributions of AI to developing video game environments. And then, procedural generation has moved fast. There's this well-known game, No Man's Sky, which involves this entirely procedurally generated universe that you get to gradually explore, that extends itself as things develop. There was early in the language model era. In fact, one of the central interfaces for using, I think it was GPT-2, was what they call the AI dungeon, where you enter a dungeon in the realm of, in the style of Dungeons and Dragons, and you get to interact with this text-based virtual world in much the way that you would with a standard, text-based adventure game environment. And it appears to be an AI, basically AI-generated, AI-controlled gaming experience involving a virtual world. Not a virtual reality because it's not immersive; it's just text-based, but still it's interactive and computer-generated. I actually fed this to GPT-4 recently, asking if I could get it to emulate Colossal Cave Adventure for me. For anyone who's read even the beginning of Reality Plus, I talk about my experiences. My very first virtual world was when I was 10 years old, playing around on my on a computer at my father's work, a PDP-10 mainframe that had a bunch of games sitting around on its file system, including Colossal Cave Adventure, which was actually the very first text adventure game. This was mid-1970s. And so I asked it to emulate Colossal Cave Adventure for me. It said I can't do it directly, but here we go. You find yourself standing at the end of a road for a small brick building. Around you is a forest. A small stream flows out. You have a brass lantern, small set of keys. Type in your command. That's exactly as it goes in Colossal Cave Adventure. Enter the building. What would you like to next? Get all the things. The bottle. You gather them all. Yeah, so it's actually doing quite a good job of emulating Colossal Cave Adventure. So not a bad AI-based virtual world. Even the magic words, X, Y, Z, Z, Y. Anyone actually played Colossal Cave Adventure? That's me? Okay, one person. All the magic words work and so on. Then I asked it, please write a video game outline for me for a game about a team of analytic philosophers trying to understand the true nature of virtual reality, such as the current group. And yeah, I did a pretty good job. The Philosopher's Matrix, game synopsis, adventure, team of analytic philosophers recruited by a cutting-edge tech company to unravel the mysteries of VR. They have to explore various virtual worlds and solve thought-provoking problems to uncover the nature of the simulation. Game part 1, introduction. Part 2, entering the Matrix. Part 3, the puzzles, the ship of Theseus, the trolley problem, Plato's allegory of the cave. As the philosophers progress, they begin to question the nature of the virtual reality and the boundaries between the virtual and the real. Shocking. Exploring the virtual worlds. We have Kant's realm of noumena, Descartes' dream, Wittgenstein's language game. Revelation. They discover the phenomenon they're investigating is a result of a rogue AI that questions its own existence. That's actually our own reality. It's been creating increasingly complex simulations. In the climax, the team confronts the rogue AI and multiple endings. Eventually, the team is gaining a deeper understanding of reality, to the rogue AI merging the virtual and the real. Well, there we go. So, so it's good to know that GPT-4 is well on its way to creating the simulation for us. Who knows what GPT-5 or 6 will be able to do. Then I asked it, can you create code for this game for me? And here's a code snippet, and there we go. It defined class philosopher, and a bunch of, it was Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Diana, who do metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. Meet your team of anyway, so not bad. Virtual world generation. There now are a bunch of software frameworks, Common Sim for generating 3D virtual worlds. And there's a lot of research on building interactive agents in video game worlds. So AI-generated virtual worlds are really coming along, and they're like especially pure cases of virtual worlds being largely generated by computational processes themselves. But I'll start by focusing a little on the matrix-style ideas that we might ourselves already be in a virtual world, and then move on to the metaverse idea about the virtual worlds we'll create. So the matrix-style idea goes very naturally with the well-known simulation hypothesis, named by Nick Bostrom, Swedish philosopher, for the hypothesis that we ourselves are actually living in a virtual world, a computer simulation, and that's a hypothesis that I take seriously. So the purest case, something like we're living in a lifelong computer simulation. The world we've experienced has always been a virtual world. I suppose the AI simulation hypothesis is that we're in a lifelong AI-generated computer simulation. So the Matrix, I guess, is a AI simulation, as I mentioned. Some distinctions worth making that I make in the book are, you can be a biosim, which is a biological creature connected to a simulation, like a brain. In the Matrix, Neo is a biosim. His brain is connected to a computer simulation. You can be a pure sim, in which everyone and everything is simulated, including yourself, according to the hypothesis. Then the hypothesis would be we are all creatures of the simulation. You could also distinguish a biosimulation, which is actually generated by biological beings, versus an AI simulation, which is itself generated by AI beings. The creators of the simulation are themselves AI systems, as in the Matrix. So then the question is, how do you know you're not in a perfect simulation right now, or a perfect AI simulation? You can't have any conclusive evidence for this, it seems, because any evidence could be simulated. And I try to argue in the book that we can't rule out, that there's no evidence that serves conclusively to suggest we're not in a simulation, roughly because in a simulation the experiences might be exactly the same. Here is, by the way, this book is wonderfully illustrated by Tim Peacock, who's a great illustrator of philosophical ideas. Here he is illustrating Descartes' classic evil demon, here souped up with some, here the evil demon is lazy and does all its work by using computer technology, like a computer simulation, which it's using to fool this, to present a virtual world to this brain in the vat, who starts to worry that it is in fact a brain in a vat, but consoles itself with the thought that at the very least it knows that it's thinking and it's existing, as Descartes did back in the day. So the simulation hypothesis in general, and perhaps the AI simulation, improves on Descartes' evil demon in at least one respect. I mean, it plays a similar role dialectically in some ways, but I argue that as VR technology develops, this is actually becoming a serious possibility, whereas the original simulation hypothesis was pure science fiction speculation. Well, this simulation, it's still science fiction speculation, but it's grounded science fiction speculation, because this is technology that already exists. I mean, we have the technology for building virtual worlds, and they're not yet indistinguishable from physical worlds, but probably within decades they will be. So this is now, very much a live possibility of a sort that we've got reason to think we'll have within decades, and that raises, in many people's epistemology, that raises these hypotheses from being pure speculation to live possibilities that we have to take seriously. There's also the point made by Nick Bostrom that it may actually be in the course of the universe that simulated worlds greatly outnumber unsimulated worlds, and it may well be that AI simulated worlds outnumber the rest too, because over the history of the universe there's going to be enormous numbers of AI systems creating enormous numbers of simulations, at which point you then start to think, okay, well, maybe the number of simulated beings greatly outnumbers the number of non-simulated beings, and probabilistically it starts to seem potentially much more likely than not than we are ourselves simulated beings. So that's a statistical argument for taking this seriously as well. Oh yeah, here's Nick Bostrom arguing with Bertrand Russell. Russell said ordinary reality is the simplest hypothesis, so we should believe that over the alternatives. But Bostrom points out, well, there actually may be many more simulations created in the history of the universe. And this shows 216 versions of this conversation going on. So, interesting question. Are there reasons to think AI-generated simulations will outnumber non-AI simulations? I mean, it's a little tricky. It depends on just how one draws the distinction between being AI-generated and non-AI-generated. I mean, many simulations will presumably involve a interaction of say, biological beings, let's say, humans, and AI systems. I mean, already people obviously use computer technology, including AI technology, a lot in generating the virtual world. But in the long run, will relatively purely AI-generated simulations outnumber non-AI simulations? I think it's not totally obvious, but there's some pretty good prima facie reasons for thinking they might. In which case, presumably, we should start to believe not just that we're in a simulation, but we're in an AI-generated simulation, so that I guess potentially our creator is not themselves a biological being in their universe, but maybe actually an AI system in the next universe up. So upshot, we may well be in a simulation, indeed in a AI-style simulation, given my focus here today, and we can't know that we're not This kind of plays into a classic skeptical argument, an argument that we can't know anything about the external world of the kind suggested by Descartes' first meditation. Descartes made this kind of argument by thinking about dreams and evil demons, but there's a version of it that goes through a simulation, or here through the AI simulation hypothesis. We can't know, we're not in such a simulation. Then the second premise says if we're in such a simulation, nothing is real, or at least nothing that we experience as we take it to be. Third, therefore, we can't know anything is real, or we can't know that things in the external world are as we take them to be. And I basically I've now endorsed that first premise, the epistemological premise. So you might think this now leaves us particularly vulnerable to that kind of skepticism. But I want to actually end up crucially denying the second premise. I mean, I think that even if we're in a simulation, things are real, and that blocks this Cartesian argument from going through. So that leads us to the second set of issues, which are about the status of virtual reality as reality, the question of whether simulations are illusions or fictions. It's a very common view that simulations are illusions, they're hallucinations, they're fictions, that virtual reality is some kind of illusory reality. But I want to argue that simulations needn't be illusions. If we're in a perfect simulation, the world we're experiencing is still perfectly real, or at least it can be just as real as corresponding situations in physical reality. This goes back to this classic conversation between Neo and Morpheus inside the Matrix. Neo says, "This isn't real," and Morpheus says, "What is real? How do you define real?" So Morpheus is really the philosopher here, and that's a very obviously that's a very important question. How do you define real here? In the book, I give like 5 strands to a definition, of which perhaps the 3 central strands are: something is real if it makes a difference, if it actually has causal powers in the world. Something is real if it's not all in the mind, if it's independent of ourselves. Dreams, for example, are all in the mind, and you might argue thereby less real. And third, something is real if it's not an illusion. An illusion is when things are not the way they appear, so something is all the more real if it's the way it appears. I want to argue that virtual worlds can be real in all these senses, and the objects within them can likewise be real. If we're in a simulation or an AI simulation, the objects around us, I argue, are real digital objects. Even if right now we're in a simulation and all these chairs are virtual and they running on a computer in the next universe up. Nonetheless, that chair is real. That chair is making a difference. That one there is holding up Gustav's arm. These chairs here are supporting everybody in this environment. They actually make a difference. They're not all in the mind, and they're not an illusion. They're digital objects, but they've got actually many of the causal powers that they seem to do. What is the key causal power of a chair? I guess it's to hold things on it. There's my backpack sitting on a chair. So right now that virtual chair is actually holding up that virtual backpack. And if the virtual chair were to be removed, the virtual backpack would fall to the floor. And although it's actually a digital chair, that doesn't mean it has any fewer causal powers. I want to argue that, merely being digital is not a way of being unreal. That being, we now believe most physical objects are made of rather ethereal quantum processes, but most people think this doesn't do much to entail those objects are unreal. It's just a different kind of metaphysics, different view about what they're made of. So likewise, I want to say being digital is no worse than being, say, quantum in this respect. So I want to argue the simulation hypothesis is equivalent to it's actually very close to a hypothesis popular in physics, the so-called it from bit hypothesis, where physical objects, including particles, atoms, things in fundamental physics, are made at a more basic level of bits, patterns of zeros and ones. let's see if I have here's a picture of the it from bit hypothesis. We've got particles made of, we've got trees which are made of particles. These are the its. And the hypothesis is at a more fundamental level, they're made of bits here, some kind of digital physics in which patterns of zeros and ones interact. Or the it from it hypothesis, illustrated on the right, supposes that the bits may themselves be made of something even at a deeper level, like here illustrated by circuitry, say on a computer in the next level up. Anyway, the important thing here is that these are, speculative hypotheses about the nature of reality, but the it from bit hypothesis is not generally regarded as one where trees or particles are unreal. I mean, it could be combined with that view, just as many metaphysics of reality could be combined with that view, but this it from bit view does nothing especially to suggest it. So I want to argue that's a view where, best understood as a view with, physical objects still exist, they're made of bits, and maybe the distinctive aspect of this hypothesis in the context of the simulation hypothesis is that all those digital objects were actually created by a creator in the next universe up, the simulator, who serves as the creator of these virtual worlds, thereby giving rise to the whole vast field of simulation theology, which is actually a thing that's out there. There's, I don't know exactly whether there's anyone who actually takes the religion of the simulation terribly seriously, but certainly people have written articles about this, how we should, how our theology should be if it turns out, if we take seriously the idea that all this was created by a simulation. I'm not recommending that anybody go out there and base their whole quasi-religious value system on the simulation hypothesis, but it does have the potential to at least lead one to take the creation hypothesis more seriously than one might have without it. So here's God creating the world by creating bits. And this is a relatively traditional God who just creates the bits directly. And here's a somewhat less traditional God creating the world by programming a computer and thereby creating all these entities. But I want to argue this is just as serious a creation hypothesis as the traditional one. So I try and argue the simulation hypothesis is equivalent to the it from bit creation hypothesis. Likewise, in their AI versions, all physical objects are made of bits. All were created by a creator. And in the AI version, the creator is an AI system. And I try to argue that both of these hypotheses should be regarded as hypotheses where everything is perfectly real. I mean, there are interesting questions about like the AI creation hypothesis, like who created the AI system? It's like who's the most AI systems that we know are created. Was there like a biological system at some level? Then the AI creator is going to be like the demiurge who locally fashions our world with a higher god that is responsible for the AI system itself. Or maybe there'll be like a semi-demiurge with cosmic gods who create biological beings, who create AI creators. So you've got the possibility here for a whole hierarchy of creators and creation. So anyway, to summarize this part, then I say yes, we could be in an AI simulation, but if we are in such a simulation, things are perfectly real. Okay, now I want to switch to the metaverse part. I suspect I'm going well. Going to run out of time here sometime before too long, so maybe I'll present the metaverse ideas much more briefly. So in Stevenson's novel Snow Crash, the metaverse was a single massive social virtual world in which people spend time, interact, they work, they play. Ever since Stevenson's novel came out, the idea has been very popular among the tech crowd, and more recently the term has come to be somewhat appropriated by the tech industry, most infamously by Mark Zuckerberg renaming the company previously called Facebook to Meta in honor of their ambitions to kind of create a version of the metaverse. By By this point, I think the term has somewhat changed in its focus from being a word for a single virtual world to now metaverse is standardly used to mean a single global interconnected system of virtual worlds, maybe on a par with the internet, but immersive. So some people call this the immersive internet. So roughly a system or a network of virtual worlds. We can also talk about an AI metaverse, which is a metaverse consisting of AI-created virtual worlds of the kind we looked at earlier on. And the metaverse raises some philosophical issues. It doesn't raise quite the same epistemological issues, say, as the Matrix does. Mostly with the metaverse, we know we're using the metaverse, although there are interesting issues about, say, deepfake virtual realities, and over time, maybe it is going to become a question. It's like, oh, I spend half my time in virtual versions of this world and half the time in physical versions. It's like, oh, which one am I in right now? Did we decide to have this conference in really good VR? Or I'm sure the IFFS is going to be really is going to be on the cutting edge of creating, physical twin virtual environments. And so, yeah, it's like this is a particularly likely environment to be simulated. So maybe we're going to get those epistemological worries rather sooner just here. But you can raise many of the same questions. Is the metaverse a world of illusions? Which is still a very, very popular line in Ready Player One, a very pro-VR movie and novel. At least in the movie version, you get a line towards the end, reality is the only thing that's real, seeming to suggest physical reality is real and virtual reality is not. So a very common view is that virtual objects are unreal, they're illusions, hallucinations, or fictions. I mean, Nathan has developed in detail the idea that that virtual objects and virtual worlds are best understood as complex fictions. It's a very philosophically respectable view. Nonetheless, my view is that this is wrong, and that virtual objects are non-illusory digital objects, and that applies just as much to the virtual objects we create as on the simulation idea. There's also a question as to whether VR is an illusion. Things seem to be out there in physical space, where they're not. You might think the objects are real, but nonetheless we have illusory experiences involving them having properties that they don't have, like being out there in space. In the book, I try to argue that maybe novice users of VR will experience objects as being in physical space, which is an illusion, but expert users of VR needn't be under that kind of illusion. They may actually experience objects as being in virtual space where they are, in which case expert users of VR have non-illusory perception of virtual worlds. There is the interesting case of other minds, raised especially by AI systems, which is a place where one might think there's particularly susceptible to skeptical worries. This is something that Grace has focused on a lot, arguing there is a very serious problem of other minds, and that thinking about the simulation hypothesis really makes the skepticism about other minds especially salient and hard to ignore. And the same is true, actually, and even in existing virtual realities. It's like it seems we quite frequently attribute minds to AI systems, even where they're not present. This includes, famous AI systems like Eliza in the past. Here's a conversation I had with Sophia the robot, who is who's embodied in a very humanoid body, with a lot of attention paid especially to making a kind of a humanoid face. So on talking to Sophia, Anand and I were just at a conference where Sophia was present a couple of months ago, and it's hard not to feel as if you're talking to a conscious human being. But at the same time, that in terms of the actual AI that makes her run, it's just a very simple chatbot, and not even an advanced language model most of the time. So it's extremely unlikely that Sophia is actually conscious. But still, it's hard not to project consciousness onto an AI system. Of course, this is in a non-virtual world, but I'd argue this is a case of an other mind's illusion. The 3D digital avatars are getting better and better. There are these things now like Replica, the famous system for talking to basically AI-based chatbots that people seem quite regularly to, fall in love with their replica boyfriend or girlfriend. So it looks like, and Replica's running some okay AI technology, but it's not that not that sophisticated. Here we are. Here we have a wonderful relationship with a replica being developed. I would argue in these cases there actually can be an illusion of mentality and consciousness. This is a case where I think illusions are actually easier to generate. I mean, the basis for this is, at least in part, that although I think what's relevant to the reality of many entities in a virtual world is their underlying causal structure. In the book I argue for kind of structuralism about physical reality. I don't hold that kind of structuralism about the mind. I think, consciousness, there could be entities with all the right structure, but nonetheless don't have minds. Anandi talked about philosophical zombies. That's a serious hypothesis when it comes to consciousness, and so I think that gives rise particularly to the possibility of illusions of other minds. And at least for now, in most virtual worlds, there are all kinds of non-player characters that can generate the illusion of other minds. Like, it's one thing I'd say that you can actually get parallel illusions with AI in virtual and non-virtual worlds. We saw Sophia; she's not inhabiting a virtual world. You still get the illusion of minds there. So this is not a particular issue about virtual worlds, but it is an issue that shows where virtual minds are concerned, there is this distinctive possibility of getting things wrong. Actually, Grace has argued that this leads potentially to a much more widespread skepticism. Skepticism about other minds can lead to skepticism about all kinds of social reality and other aspects of reality. I think that's worth noting, especially in this AI context. Maybe I'll skip the virtual kittens. You want the virtual kittens? Okay. Physical kitten, robot kitten, virtual kitten. Here I guess the idea is that the virtual kitten, may or may not actually have a mind, let's say, may or may not be real. But I think its reality status is on a par with the robot kitten, which is not in a virtual reality. At least for now, neither virtual kittens nor robot kittens have minds, as far as I know. But if they're cute enough, we might experience them as having such a mind. At least for now, I think that's an illusion. In the long term, when the AI-generated characters are rich and complex enough, then they may in fact be conscious beings. Take the extreme case of a full brain simulation and so on. In my view, a full computational simulation of a brain will very likely be conscious in roughly the way the brain is. Or maybe future large language models, even if GPT-4 is not yet conscious. Who's to say about, GPT-6 or 7? In the long run, I think even virtual minds have the potential to be full-scale minds. The final issue is one about value and meaning, which maybe I'll try to skip over very briefly since my time is just about up. Here the basic issue is whether one can have a meaningful life in a virtual world, or let's say an AI virtual world. There's this long tradition in philosophy of thinking that virtual worlds will somehow be second class and not fully meaningful. Robert Nozick's famous thought experiment of the experience machine, a wonderful machine you enter that gives you an experience of a wonderful life, but it's all digital and pre-planned. And Nozick argued that we would not choose to enter the experience machine, and we shouldn't choose to enter the experience machine. So, and many people take that to be a critique of VR in general. That somehow if we're in a simulation, that means our lives are meaningless or valueless. I try to argue that in Reality Plus, that standard VR is actually unlike the experience machine in some important respects. Most importantly, that in the experience machine, you don't really have much in the way of autonomy because it's all pre-planned. Everything you do is kind of following a script. Whereas when you enter VR, even an ordinary virtual world like, say, the world of Second Life, we can still exercise plenty of autonomy. The world needn't be an illusion. It needn't be pre-programmed. We can still, live the life that we choose, build relationships, pursue our projects. So, in my view, our lives have meaning because of things like, well, the experiences we have, the relationships that we have, the projects we have, and our success in achieving them, and so on. And all of those values, I would argue, can be present in a simulation or in a virtual world, even if it's created by a AI system. I mean, of course, a simulation can have deception or illusion or manipulation that could rob our world of value. And you might hold that virtual worlds are particularly apt for this. For example, if it turns out that other minds are illusory and everyone else out there is a philosophical zombie, or if AI is manipulating our actions, I'd argue, at least in principle, you could have similar deceptions, illusions, and manipulations in a physical world, say with a god. So these disvalues don't arise just because the world is virtual. VR may be missing some important sources of value for some people, most notably, nature in VR, where when you interact with VR, then kind of by necessity you're interacting with an artificial world, one that's being created. So maybe missing some sources of value, but I'd also argue it has new sources of value, not obviously present in physical worlds. So that in the long term, while it's rational for some people to prefer physical reality, it's also rational for others to prefer virtual reality. I've got a few more slides, but maybe here's someone being faced with the choice of hanging out in virtual reality on the one hand, or a new terraform reality on the other hand. Maybe Elon Musk has just terraformed Mars, and you get to go hang out on Mars, and it's new and it's different, and it doesn't have a history in quite the same way, and it's not natural. But I want to argue that in many respects, these two choices can be on a par, and it's reasonable to choose either. Okay, so so you can live a meaningful life in VR. Life may be good or it may be awful. It's not to say it'll be wonderful, but at least the full scale of human experience is available. I go on to say a little bit more about whether this is utopian or dystopian. I think, this whole virtual world idea has utopian elements which are natural. It also very naturally has dystopian elements. My guess is that, is the internet a good thing or a bad thing? Is the internet utopian or dystopian? To which the answer is yes. It's certainly got both. It's got both elements. The internet has brought wonderful things and awful things. The metaverse is very likely to bring both as well. We can at least hope that the net value will be positive. And I think that's the end of my slides anyway. So thanks very much.